The Blackwood pack made a fatal calculation on that freezing Tuesday night. When they dragged 22-year-old Nora Bennett from her bed and shoved her off the jagged cliffs of Greystone Ridge, they were convinced the weak human was gone forever. To them, she was just a loose end being tied up. But they forgot to check the bottom of the ravine. Instead of death, Nora found something far more dangerous waiting in the woods. This is the shocking, true-to-life story of how a rejected orphan survived the fall to become the most protected woman in the kingdom, all because a toddler with glowing gold eyes decided she was Mom. The rain over the Blackwood territory didn't just fall, it hammered against the earth like a judgment. It was the kind of storm that drowned out screams, which was exactly what Alpha Jared Cole was counting on. Nora Bennett shivered violently, her soaked pajamas clinging to her thin frame. The mud of the compound yard oozed between her bare toes, cold and gritty. She wasn't a wolf. She didn't have the rapid healing, the thick fur, or the preternatural heat that radiated off the men and women surrounding her. She was just Nora, the orphan daughter of the pack's former accountant, a human allowed to stay only out of a misplaced sense of pity that had long since curdled into resentment. "Please," Nora gasped, her voice barely audible over the thunder. "Jared, I didn't steal the ledger. You know I didn't." Alpha Jared Cole stood on the porch of the main house, dry and imperious under the overhang. He was a man of sharp angles and sharper cruelty, his eyes flashing the dull yellow of a wolf on the edge of a shift. Next to him stood Brenda, his mate, smirking as she clutched a leather-bound book to her chest, the very ledger Nora was accused of selling to a rival pack. "It's not just about the theft, Nora," Jared said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the wind. "It's about the liability. You've always been a burden, a weak link, and now you're a traitor." The pack members encircling her didn't look sympathetic. To them, humans were pets at best, and parasites at worst. Nora had spent her life trying to be useful, doing the taxes, scrubbing the floors, mending the clothes torn during the full moon runs. She had made herself indispensable, or so she thought. But in the hierarchy of wolves, utility never outweighed blood. "I have proof!" Nora cried out, stepping forward, though a rough hand grabbed her shoulder and yanked her back. It was Silas, Jared's beta. His grip was bruising. "Check Brenda's bank accounts. She's the one who's been meeting with the rogues." Brenda laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on Nora's nerves. "Hear that, Jared? She's desperate. Blaming your own mate?" Jared's face hardened. He descended the steps, stopping inches from Nora. He smelled of rain and aggression. "We don't keep rats in the Blackwood pack, and we don't exile humans who know our secrets. We handle them." The implication hit Nora like a physical blow. Exile meant being driven to the border. Handling meant she wasn't leaving this territory alive. "Grab her," Jared commanded. Silas and another enforcer, a brute named Caleb, hoisted Nora off the ground by her arms. She kicked and screamed, but it was like fighting gravity. They dragged her toward the SUVs, waiting with engines running. "No, no, please! I've been loyal! I raised your kids! I fixed your books!" Nora screamed, tears mixing with the rain on her face. Jared didn't even watch as they shoved her into the back seat. He just turned back to Brenda and put his arm around her waist. That was the last image Nora had of the only home she'd ever known. The smug victory on the face of the real traitor, and the indifference of the man who had promised her father he'd keep her safe. The drive up to Greystone Ridge took 20 minutes. The silence in the car was suffocating. Nora sat wedged between Caleb and the door, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at Silas in the driver's seat. "Silas," she whispered, "you know me." You know I wouldn't do this. Silas's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, briefly flashing with something that looked like guilt, but he quickly masked it. Orders are orders, Nora. You shouldn't have crossed Brenda. I didn't cross her. I caught her. Doesn't matter, Silas said flatly, turning the wheel as the car navigated the treacherous switchbacks. She's the Luna. You're nothing. The car stopped. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the edge of the cliff. Beyond that beam of light, there was only a terrifying, abyssal blackness, and the roar of the river hundreds of feet below. They dragged her out. The wind up here was ferocious, tearing through her thin clothes. Caleb pushed her toward the edge. Her heels skid in the mud. Don't make this hard, Caleb grunted. Just jump and it'll be over quick. Nora turned to face them, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. If you do this, she stammered, if you kill me, the truth will come out. It always does. Goodbye, Nora, Silas said. He didn't look angry. He looked bored. He stepped forward and shoved her. It wasn't a dramatic struggle. It was just a push. Nora's feet slipped on the wet shale. She grasped at the air, her fingers brushing Silas's jacket, but she found no purchase. She fell backward into the dark. The scream was ripped from her throat, but the wind swallowed it instantly. The sensation of falling was sickening, a lurch in her stomach that seemed to last an eternity. Then, agony. She hit a protruding tree root jutting out from the cliff face, shattering her arm. The impact spun her around, and she slammed into the rocky slope, tumbling, sliding, and crashing through brush that tore at her skin like razor wire. The world was a blur of pain and noise until... crack. Her head struck something hard. Darkness, absolute and silent, finally took her. Nora didn't know how much time had passed. It could have been hours. It could have been days. She woke to the sensation of freezing water lapping against her legs. She was lying face down on a bank of river stones, half of her body submerged in the icy current. Every inch of her screamed in pain. She tried to move, and a white-hot spike of agony shot up her left arm. She gasped, choking on a cough that tasted like copper. Broken. Definitely broken. Her ribs felt like shattered glass, and her head throbbed with a rhythmic, pounding pressure. I'm alive. The thought was terrifying. If she was alive, she was still a problem for Jared. If he found out she had survived the drop, he would finish the job personally. Nora dragged herself out of the water, clawing at the muddy bank with her good hand. She had to move. She had to hide. The river had carried her downstream, far away from the drop point at Greystone Ridge. The forest here was ancient and dense, the trees towering like cathedral pillars blocking out the grey morning light. This wasn't Blackwood territory anymore. She had drifted into the neutral zone, or worse, the borderlands of the Silver Moon Kingdom. She crawled until she reached the shelter of a massive oak tree, collapsing against its roots. She needed warmth. She needed a doctor. But all she had was wet pajamas and a will to live that surprised even her. As she lay there, trying to regulate her breathing, she heard a sound. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't the river. It was a whimper. Nora froze. A wounded animal. A wolf! The sound came again, a high-pitched, distressed cry. It sounded human, or close to it. Ignoring the screaming protests of her body, Nora pushed herself up to a sitting position. She peered around the trunk of the oak. About 20 yards away, tangled in a thicket of brambles, was a child. He couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old. He was stark naked, shivering violently, his skin pale against the dark thorns. But it was his eyes that stopped Nora's heart. Even from this distance, they glowed a brilliant, molten gold. A pup, a werewolf child. He was stuck. The thorns had snagged his skin, and every time he thrashed to get free, they dug deeper. He was crying, calling out for someone who wasn't there. Nora looked around frantically. Where were the parents? Werewolves were fiercely protective. No pack left a pup unattended, especially not one this young. But the woods were silent. There was no scent of adults, no thundering paws rushing to the rescue. "Walk away," a voice in her head whispered. "You are hurt. You are human. Getting involved with wolves got you thrown off a cliff." The boy let out a sob that broke into a cough. Nora cursed under her breath. She gritted her teeth, grabbed a fallen branch to use as a cane, and forced herself to stand. She stumbled toward the thicket. "Hey!" she rasped, her voice wrecked. "Hey, it's okay. Be still." The boy froze, his glowing eyes snapping to her. He growled, a tiny, vibrating sound in his chest. It would have been cute if he wasn't clearly terrified and capable of biting her finger off. "I'm not going to hurt you," Nora said, dropping to her knees beside the brambles. The movement made black spots dance in her vision. "I'm going to get you out." She reached in. The thorns tore at her hands, adding fresh cuts to her existing wounds, but she didn't stop. She carefully untangled the vines from the boy's chubby legs. He watched her warily, sniffing the air. He could smell her blood. He could smell her fear. "Almost there," she whispered. With one final tug, she snapped a thick vine and pulled him free. The boy tumbled into her lap. He was freezing, his skin like ice. Instinct took over. Nora ignored her own pain and wrapped her arms around him, trying to share what little body heat she had left. "You're freezing," she murmured, rubbing his back. "Where is your mummy?" The boy didn't answer. He just buried his face in her wet shirt, his small claws retracting. He seemed to sense that she was damaged, that she was no threat. Suddenly the boy stiffened. He pulled back and looked at her, his nose twitching. Then he did something unexpected. He placed a small, muddy hand on her broken arm. "Ouch," Nora hissed. "Careful, buddy." The boy's eyes swirled with gold light. He leaned forward and licked the scrape on her cheek. "Gross," she chuckled weakly, tears leaking from her eyes due to the pain in her arm. "But thanks." She needed to get them to shelter. But before she could even try to stand, the atmosphere in the woods changed. The birds stopped singing. The wind died down. A low, vibrating rumble shook the ground beneath them. Nora looked up, clutching the boy tighter to her chest. Emerging from the mist between the trees were wolves, massive, hulking beasts the size of ponies. There were 5 of them. They moved with a synchronized, lethal grace, circling her position. Nora's blood ran cold. These weren't just any wolves. Their fur was sleek, their muscles rippling with power, and leading them was a wolf of pure, midnight black, larger than any she had ever seen in the Blackwood pack. The black wolf stepped forward, its lips curling back to reveal teeth the size of daggers. A low growl emanated from its throat, vibrating through Nora's bones. They thought she had kidnapped the child. Nora couldn't run. She couldn't fight. She was a broken human, surrounded by apex predators. She did the only thing she could. She curled her body around the boy, shielding him with her own broken frame, exposing her back to the teeth of the pack. If they attacked, they would have to go through her to get to him. "I didn't hurt him!" she screamed at the black wolf, her voice cracking. "He was stuck. I was just helping him." The black wolf paused. It didn't attack. It tilted its massive head, its eyes, intelligent and piercing, locking onto hers. The boy in her arms squirmed. He broke free of her hold and stood up on shaky legs. Nora tried to pull him back, terrified they would lunge, but the boy took a step toward the giant black wolf. "Dada!" the boy chirped. The tension in the clearing snapped. The black wolf's form shimmered, bones cracking and reshaping in a blur of motion. Within seconds, a man stood where the beast had been. He was tall, over 6'4", with broad shoulders and a physique carved from granite. He was naked, as all shifters were after a turn, but he carried himself with such terrifying authority that his nudity was irrelevant. His hair was dark and wet, plastered to his forehead, and his eyes were a storm of grey and silver. This was an alpha. No, Nora realized with a jolt of true terror. The power radiating off him was too immense. This was the Alpha King Declan Sterling. Declan didn't look at his son. He looked at Nora. He looked at the blood soaking her clothes, the unnatural angle of her left arm, the bruises darkening her neck. And then he looked at how she was still trying to shield the boy with her good arm, even while trembling with terror. The boy ran to Declan's leg, hugging his knee. "Dada, she help!" Declan scooped the boy up with one arm, his gaze never leaving Nora. He stepped closer. The other wolves shifted back into human form, warriors all of them, and quickly threw a cloak over their king's shoulders. Declan knelt in front of Nora. Up close, he was devastatingly handsome, but his expression was terrifyingly cold. "You are human," he stated. His voice was deep, a baritone that commanded obedience. "Yes," Nora whispered. "You are injured. Severely." "Yes." "Why did you stop?" Declan asked, his eyes narrowing. "You are dying. You should have kept moving to find help for yourself. Why stop for a pup that could have killed you?" Nora swallowed hard, fighting the darkness encroaching on her vision. He was stuck. He was crying. Declan stared at her for a long moment. He reached out, his hand hovering over her face. Nora flinched, expecting a blow. Instead, his thumb gently brushed a smudge of dirt from her cheek. The touch sent a shock wave of electricity through her that stunned them both. Declan pulled his hand back as if burned, his eyes widening in shock. "Alpha," one of the warriors said urgently. "She's a stray. We should leave her. We have the prince." "No," Declan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. The little boy in his arms pointed a chubby finger at Nora. "Mine," the boy declared firmly. "She mine." Declan looked from his son to the broken woman on the ground. A strange, possessive light ignited in his silver eyes. "You heard the prince," Declan announced, standing up and extending a hand toward Nora. "She comes with us." Nora looked at the hand. It was large, calloused, and offered not with pity, but with a demand. She reached up with her trembling, good hand. As soon as their skin touched, the darkness finally won. Nora's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed. But she didn't hit the cold ground. She fell into the arms of the Alpha King. The first thing Nora registered was the smell. It wasn't the metallic tang of blood or the damp rot of the riverbank. It was sterile, antiseptic and lavender. She opened her eyes, blinking against the harsh fluorescent lights. She was lying in a bed that felt softer than anything she had ever slept in, even back at the Blackwood Manor before her parents died. A rhythmic beeping sound echoed to her left. She turned her head, wincing at the stiffness in her neck, and saw a Philips IntelliView monitor tracking her heart rate. "She's awake," a soft voice announced. Nora tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness slammed her back down. Her left arm was encased in a heavy fiberglass cast, and her chest felt tight, likely bound for broken ribs. A man in a white coat stepped into her line of sight. He was older, with greying temples and a kind face. "Easy, Miss Bennett. You've been through a lot. I'm Dr. Harris." Nora's breath hitched. "How do you know my name?" "We found your ID in your back pocket. It was waterlogged but legible," Dr. Harris explained, checking the drip on her IV bag. You're in the private medical wing of the Sterling estate. You've been unconscious for 3 days. Sterling estate. The realization hit her like a bucket of ice water. She was in the heart of the Silver Moon Kingdom. This was the most powerful territorial pack on the continent. Humans weren't just unwelcome here. They were usually escorted out at the border or hunted for sport if they trespassed. I need to leave, Nora rasped, struggling against the sheets. Please, if Alpha Sterling finds me here. Alpha Sterling is the one who brought you here, the doctor interrupted gently, and he is currently pacing the hallway because his son refuses to leave this room. Nora paused, confused. His son? As if on cue, a small tuft of brown hair popped up from the side of the bed. The little boy from the woods, Leo, climbed onto the mattress. He was clean now, wearing a pair of dinosaur-patterned pajamas that looked brand new. "Mama!" Leo chirped, crawling over the covers carefully to avoid her cast. He curled up against her good side, resting his head on her shoulder. Dr. Harris sighed, looking both amused and baffled. "He hasn't slept in his own bed since you arrived. He screamed the hospital down when the nurses tried to separate you for the MRI scan. We actually had to sedate him just to get you into surgery." Nora looked down at the child. The terror of her situation faded slightly as she felt the warmth of his small body. "Why?" she whispered. I'm nobody." "To him, you're evidently somebody," a deep voice rumbled from the doorway. Nora stiffened. Alpha King Declan Sterling walked in. He had traded his mud-caked form for a charcoal-grey tailored suit that probably cost more than Nora's entire life earnings. He filled the room with an oppressive, dominating energy. His silver eyes swept over her, clinical and cold, assessing her recovery. Dr. Harris nodded respectfully. "I'll give you a moment, Alpha." The doctor slipped out, closing the door with a soft click. Nora pulled the sheet higher, her heart hammering against the monitor sensors. The beep, beep, beep speeding up, betraying her fear. Declan walked to the foot of the bed. He didn't look at her. He looked at his son. "Leo has not spoken a full sentence in 6 months, Declan said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Not since his mother died." Nora's eyes widened. I didn't know." "He calls you Mama," Declan continued, his gaze finally snapping to hers. It felt like a physical weight. "Do you know why?" "No," Nora stammered. I untangled him from the thorns, that's all." "Wolves rely on instinct, Miss Bennett. Pups, especially high-blooded ones, can sense intent. He sensed you were willing to die to protect him." Declan walked around the side of the bed. He pulled a chair closer and sat down, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "Now, tell me, who threw you off Greystone Ridge?" Nora froze. "I fell." "Don't lie to me," Declan growled softly. The sound made the hair on her arms stand up. "You have bruising consistent with being grabbed by 2 large men. Your fingernails are torn from clawing at something, or someone. And you smell of the Blackwood pack." Nora looked away, staring at the window where the rain lashed against the glass. "It doesn't matter. They think I'm dead. It's better that way." "It matters," Declan said, "because my son has imprinted on you, and that makes you my problem. If the Blackwood pack threw away something that my son values, I need to know why." "They said I was a liability," Nora whispered, the shame burning her cheeks. "The Alpha, Jared, he accused me of stealing from the pack accounts. I didn't do it. It was his mate, Brenda. But I'm human. Who would believe me over the Luna?" Declan remained silent for a long moment. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the bedside table. "I ran a background check on you. Nora Bennett, parents deceased, employed as a household manager for the Blackwood Pack. No criminal record. Credit score 780. You have a savings account with Wells Fargo containing exactly $4,000. Nora felt exposed. You hacked my bank. I own the bank, Declan said simply. But here is the interesting part. As of this morning, your account has been closed. The funds were transferred to an offshore account linked to a shell company in the Caymans, a company owned by Brenda Cole. Nora closed her eyes, a tear escaping. She took everything, even my exit money. She erased you, Declan corrected. To the world, Nora Bennett died in a tragic hiking accident. They are already planning a memorial service. It's quite the performance. Nora felt a small hand pat her cheek. Leo was looking up at her with wide, golden eyes. Mama sad? No, baby, Nora choked out, instinctively kissing the top of his head. Just tired. Declan watched the interaction, his expression unreadable. He stood up abruptly. Rest, you aren't going anywhere. What happens when I heal? Nora asked, her voice trembling. Do you send me back, or do you just throw me out? Declan paused at the door. He looked back, and for a second, the mask of the cold king slipped, revealing a tired father. Leo has chosen you. In this pack, the Alpha's word is law, but the Alpha's air is sacred. You stay until he decides otherwise. He walked out, leaving Nora trapped in a golden cage, with a toddler who thought she was his mother, and a king who looked at her like a puzzle he couldn't wait to solve. Recovery was slow. For 2 weeks, Nora lived inside the sterile luxury of the Sterling medical wing. Her routine was dictated by nurses and a 3-year-old werewolf. Leo was relentless. If Nora went to the bathroom, he sat outside the door. If she slept, he slept. The nurses, initially skeptical of a human handling the prince, quickly changed their tune when they saw the change in the boy. He ate his vegetables if Nora pretended to eat them first. He stopped having night terrors if Nora hummed him to sleep. But Nora knew this wasn't sustainable. She was a guest, a curiosity. Soon reality would crash back in. That reality arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of a summons. The king requests your presence in his study, a guard named Cale announced. He didn't look at her with the same disdain the Blackwood wolves used to, but there was a professional distance. Nora, now wearing a simple grey dress the hospital staff had provided, nodded. Her arm was in a sling, but her ribs were healing well. She followed Cale through the corridors of the Sterling mansion. The place was less like a house and more like a fortress disguised as a museum. The floors were marble, the walls hung with tapestries that looked centuries old. They passed a security room where she saw banks of monitors, Sony 4K screens displaying every inch of the perimeter. This wasn't just a pack, it was a military operation. Kyle opened a set of double mahogany doors. Miss Bennett. Nora stepped inside. The study was vast, smelling of old paper and expensive scotch. Declan stood behind a massive desk, staring out the window at the sprawling grounds. Sit, he commanded, not turning around. Nora sat in one of the leather armchairs. She twisted her hands in her lap. Declan turned. He held a glass of amber liquid. Drink? He offered, gesturing to a crystal decanter of Macallan. No, thank you. Painkillers, she murmured. Declan nodded and took a sip. He set the glass down and leaned against the desk, crossing his ankles. Dr. Harris says you are fit for discharge tomorrow. Oh, Nora said, her stomach dropping. I see. I can pack my things. I don't have much. And go where? Declan asked sharply. You have no money, no ID. You are legally dead. If you walk out those gates, the rogues will kill you within the hour. If they don't, the cold will. I'll figure it out, Nora said, though her voice lacked conviction. I always do. I have a proposition, Declan said. He slid a thick document across the desk toward her. Nora hesitated, then reached for it. The title page read, Employment Agreement and Non-Disclosure Contract. What is this? I need a nanny, Declan stated. A caretaker for Leo. Since my wife passed, I have hired 12 nannies. Leo bit 3 of them, ran away from 4, and the others quit because they couldn't handle the pack dynamics. He's a sweet boy, Nora defended instinctively. He is a wolf pup who is grieving, Declan corrected. He is volatile and strong. But with you, he is calm, he speaks, he eats. Declan walked around the desk and stood over her. I am offering you a job. You will live here, in the staff quarters, specifically the suite adjoining Leo's nursery. You will care for him, teach him, and ensure his safety. Nora scanned the document. The salary figure made her eyes bulge. $5,000 a week? Plus benefits, health, dental, and full security clearance, Declan added. And a new identity, a passport, a driver's license, a bank account under a new name of your choosing. It was a lifeline. It was more than a lifeline. It was a fantasy. But Nora knew nothing came free, especially with alphas. What's the catch? She asked, looking up at him. Declan's expression darkened. The catch is the Blackwood pack. I know Jared Cole. He is paranoid. If he finds out you are alive, he will think you sold pack secrets to me to survive. He will come for you. So I'm a target, Nora realized. You are already a target, Declan said coldly. But if you sign that paper, you become my target, which means you are under my protection, and I have never lost something that belongs to me. Belongs to me. The phrasing sent a shiver down her spine. It was possessive, primal. Why? Nora asked softly. Why go to this trouble for a human? You could just hire a wolf nanny and force Leo to adapt. Declan looked away, his jaw tightening. He walked back to the window. Because the night I found you, when I touched your face, I felt something I haven't felt in years. A spark. He turned back to her, his eyes intense. My wolf is interested. He respects that you protected his pup. That is rare. Nora's heart raced. She knew what that meant. A wolf's interest was dangerous. It could lead to obsession. I'm just a human, Alpha, she whispered. We'll see, Declan murmured. Do we have a deal? Nora looked at the contract, then thought of Leo's golden eyes and his little hand gripping her shirt. She thought of Jared and Brenda laughing as they threw her off the cliff. She had nothing. No family, no home, no justice. But here she had a purpose, and she had the most powerful man in the world offering to stand between her and the abyss. She picked up the Mont Blanc pen resting on the desk. I have one condition, Nora said, her voice steadying. Declan raised an eyebrow. You are in no position to bargain, but go ahead. I want you to help me destroy Brenda Cole's reputation, Nora said, a cold anger finally breaking through her fear. I don't just want safety. I want them to pay. I want everyone to know she's the thief. Declan's lips curved into a slow, predatory smile. It transformed his face, making him look less like a statue and more like the devil himself. Vengeance, he mused. Now you are speaking my language. He extended his hand. Deal. Nora signed the paper. Meanwhile, in the Blackwood territory, the mood was jubilant. Brenda stood in front of her walk-in closet, admiring the new Chanel handbag she had bought with the money siphoned from the pack's emergency fund. Are you sure she's gone? She asked, glancing at her reflection. Jared, lying on the bed scrolling through his phone, didn't look up. Silas watched her hit the rocks. It's a 300-foot drop, Brenda. No one survives that. Even a wolf would be paced. Good, Brenda hummed, stroking the leather. She was annoying, always watching me with those judging little eyes. Forget her, Jared said, tossing his phone aside. Focus on the gala. The Silver Moon Pack sent the invitation. Alpha Sterling is hosting the Winter Solstice Ball next month. We need to make a good impression. We need that trade alliance. Brenda smiled, a cruel glint in her eyes. Oh, I'll make an impression. I'm going to be the most stunning Luna there. She didn't know that 300 miles away, the dead girl was currently moving into the bedroom next to the Alpha King, plotting the exact moment she would tear Brenda's perfect life apart. Back at the Sterling estate, Nora was unpacking the few new clothes the staff had bought for her. The door between her room and the nursery creaked open. Leo stood there, clutching a stuffed wolf toy. "Mama stay?" he asked, his voice small. Nora knelt down, ignoring the ache in her ribs. She opened her arms and Leo ran into them. "Yes, Leo," she whispered into his hair. "Mama is staying." But as she looked over the boy's shoulder, she saw Declan standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame. He wasn't looking at his son. He was looking at her, his gaze dropping to the curve of her neck. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the silver iris. He took a deep breath, inhaling her scent. "Dinner is at 7, Declan said, his voice rougher than before. "Don't be late." He turned and left, but the air in the room remained charged, thick with a tension that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the dangerous, forbidden pull of a mate bond that shouldn't exist. Nora touched her neck where his eyes had lingered. She had survived the fall. She had survived the cold. But she wasn't sure if she would survive Alpha Declan Sterling. Life at the Sterling estate settled into a rhythm that was deceptively peaceful, like the calm surface of a deep, dark lake. For 3 weeks, Nora lived a life she could never have imagined. She woke up in sheets made of Egyptian cotton. She drank coffee imported from Colombia. She spent her days in the nursery or the sprawling gardens with Leo, who was blossoming under her care. The silent, traumatized boy was gone. In his place was a chatterbox who loved dinosaurs and refused to wear anything but his Nike sneakers. But Nora never forgot she was an outsider. She felt the eyes of the pack on her constantly. The household staff were polite, but distant. The warriors patrolling the grounds watched her with suspicion. To them, she was a pet, a fragile human the Alpha had inexplicably taken in. The tension came to a head on a Thursday afternoon. Nora was in the south garden, pushing Leo on the swing set. The air was crisp, the winter sun pale but bright. She was laughing as Leo shouted, "Higher, Mama! Higher!" Well, isn't this a domestic little scene? Nora stopped the swing, her smile fading. She turned to see a woman standing on the cobblestone path. She was tall, stunningly beautiful, with raven-black hair and eyes that looked like chips of flint. She wore leather training gear that hugged her athletic frame, and she radiated hostility. This was Vanessa, the daughter of the Pax Gamma, and, according to the gossip Nora had overheard from the maids, the woman everyone expected Declan to eventually mate with. "Hello," Nora said, keeping her voice even. She instinctively stepped between Vanessa and Leo. Vanessa laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You can stop playing pretend, human. We all know what you are. You're a babysitter. A temporary fix until the Alpha comes to his senses." "I'm here to do a job," Nora said, her heart pounding. "If you have a problem with that, take it up with Alpha Sterling." Vanessa stepped closer, invading Nora's personal space. She smelled of musk and aggression. Declan tolerates you because of the pup, but don't think for a second you belong here. You smell like fear. You smell weak. "Mama, not weak," Leo yelled. He had jumped off the swing and was standing beside Nora, his small fists clenched. His eyes were flashing gold. Vanessa sneered at the child. "Hush, pup, the adults are talking." "Don't talk to him like that," Nora snapped, a sudden surge of anger overriding her fear. "He is your prince. Show some respect." Vanessa's eyes flashed dangerous amber. "A human teaching me hierarchy. You need to learn your place." Before Nora could react, Vanessa shoved her. It wasn't a full-force werewolf shove. That would have killed her. But it was enough to send Nora flying backward. She tripped over the edge of the sandbox and landed hard in the dirt, scraping her healing arm. "Stop!" Leo screamed. A high-pitched, oscillating howl erupted from his small throat. Suddenly, the glass doors of the patio shattered outward. Declan didn't run. He blurred. 1 second he was on the balcony, the next he was in the garden. He didn't stop to ask questions. He didn't look at Nora. He slammed into Vanessa with the force of a freight train. He pinned her against the trunk of a massive oak tree, his hand wrapped around her throat, lifting her feet off the ground. "Alpha!" Vanessa choked out, clawing at his wrist. "I gave a command," Declan roared, his voice vibrating with a dual resonance, man and wolf speaking as one. "I said she is under my protection. Did you think I was stuttering?" The entire garden went silent. Guards came running but stopped dead at the sight of their king's rage. She disrespected me," Vanessa gasped, her face turning purple. "She is the mother of my heir in all but blood," Declan snarled, tightening his grip. "If you touch her again, if you even look at her wrong, I will strip you of your rank and exile you to the wastelands. Do you understand?" "Yes," Vanessa wheezed. "Yes, Alpha." Declan dropped her. Vanessa crumbled to the grass, coughing and gasping. She scrambled to her feet and ran, not daring to look back. Declan stood there for a moment, his chest heaving, his hands trembling with the effort to contain his shift. He turned slowly to Nora. The rage in his eyes didn't vanish. It shifted into something else. Something hotter. He walked over to where she was still sitting in the dirt. He knelt down, heedless of his Armani suit trousers. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough. "I'm fine," Nora whispered, though her hands were shaking, just startled. Declan reached out and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His pupils were dilated, swallowing the grey. He leaned in, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He inhaled deeply, shuddering. "You don't smell like fear anymore," he murmured against her skin. "You smell like anger. And you smell like mine." Nora stopped breathing. His lips brushed the sensitive skin below her ear. It wasn't a kiss, but it was more intimate than anything she had ever experienced. The heat radiating off him was intoxicating. "Declan," she warned softly, "I'm human. You're the king." He pulled back, his eyes searching hers. "I know what I am. And for the last 3 weeks, my wolf has been pacing inside my head, screaming that he found his mate. But that's impossible. Humans cannot be fated mates." "Then what is this?" Nora asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Declan admitted, standing up and pulling her to her feet with gentle ease. "But I intend to find out. Until then, no one touches you." He scooped up a wide-eyed Leo in one arm and kept his other hand firmly on the small of Nora's back as he marched them back into the house. It wasn't just protection anymore. It was a claim. The Winter Solstice Gala was 3 days away. The atmosphere in the Sterling estate shifted from domestic routine to high-stakes strategy. Nora sat in the library, a MacBook Pro open in front of her. Across the desk sat Silas, not the traitor Silas from her old pack, but Declan's Gamma, a tech genius with glasses and a deceptive slouch. "We have the bank records," Gamma Silas said, tapping the screen. "We traced the IP address of the transfer. It came from Brenda's personal iPad. We also have footage from a traffic cam near Greystone Ridge. It's grainy, but you can clearly see the Blackwood SUV entering the trailhead at 11:00 p.m. the night you died." "It's circumstantial," Nora said, biting her lip. "Jared will spin it. He'll say Brenda was hacked. He'll say the car was stolen." Declan, who was pacing by the fireplace, stopped. "We don't need a court of law, Nora. We need the court of public opinion. Werewolf society is built on honor. If I present this evidence in front of the Council of Alphas, Jared will be humiliated. His allies will abandon him." "But he needs to see me," Nora said, the realization settling in her gut like lead. "If I'm just a name on a screen, he can deny it. But if I'm there, standing next to you—" "Exactly," Declan said. He turned to face her. "You aren't staying in the nursery during the gala. You're coming as my guest." Nora's stomach flipped. "Declan, I can't. I'm a nanny. These people wear Versace and Dior. I own 3 pairs of jeans and a target on my back." Declan pressed a button on his desk phone. "Send them in." The double doors opened, and a team of 5 people bustled in, wheeling racks of clothes and carrying metal cases of makeup. "This is Francois and his team," Declan introduced casually. "They are the best stylists in Paris. They have 48 hours to turn you into a queen." Nora stood up, panicked. "Declan, this is too much. I can't—" Declan crossed the room in 2 strides. He stopped inches from her, blocking out the rest of the room. "Jared Cole threw you away like garbage. He made you feel small. On Saturday night, you will not be small. You will be the most terrifying thing he has ever seen. A woman he cannot touch, protected by a power he cannot fight." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Let me do this. For you. And for me. I want to see them choke on their regret." The next 2 days were a blur of exfoliation, tailoring and walking lessons. Nora felt like a doll being assembled, but as she looked in the mirror, she saw the transformation. The scared girl from the cliff was disappearing. In her place was someone harder, sharper. Saturday night arrived. The Sterling Ballroom was a masterpiece of crystal and ice. Chandeliers worth millions glittered overhead. The room was filled with the most powerful wolves on the continent, alphas in tuxedos, lunars in gowns that cost more than houses. At the top of the grand staircase, Nora waited. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She smoothed the fabric of her dress. It was a custom Elie Saab gown, a deep, shimmering midnight blue that hugged every curve before cascading to the floor like liquid water. It was strapless, exposing the creamy skin of her shoulders and, more importantly, the faint, silver scar on her arm where the bone had shattered. She wasn't hiding her scars. She was wearing them as diamonds. "Ready?" Declan appeared beside her. He looked devastating in a black velvet tuxedo. He offered his arm. "I think I'm going to throw up," Nora whispered. "Don't," Declan smirked. "That dress is a rental. Kidding, I bought it." He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Jared and Brenda just arrived. They are by the champagne fountain. They look comfortable. Let's change that." Nora took a deep breath. She thought of the cold river. She thought of the thorns tearing at Leo's skin. She thought of Brenda's laugh. She took Declan's arm. "Let's go." The music stopped as the announcer's voice boomed through the hall. "Presenting the host, Alpha King Declan Sterling." They began to descend the stairs. A hush fell over the room. Hundreds of eyes turned upward. Nora felt the weight of their stares, but Declan's grip on her arm was an anchor. She scanned the crowd, and then she saw them. Jared stood near the center, holding a glass of champagne, looking bored. Beside him, Brenda was preening in a gaudy red dress, laughing at something another Luna said. As Declan and Nora reached the landing, the crowd parted. They walked straight through the center of the room. Jared turned casually to see who had silenced the room. His eyes landed on Declan, respectful and wary. Then his gaze slid to the woman on the king's arm. He froze. The glass of champagne slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Brenda turned to see what happened. "Jared, what are you—" She stopped. The blood drained from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Nora stopped 3 feet away from them. She didn't cower. She didn't scream. She tilted her chin up, looking down her nose at the people who had tried to murder her. "Hello, Jared," Nora said, her voice clear and ringing in the silent hall. "Hello, Brenda. You look like you've seen a ghost." The shock in the room was palpable. Whispers broke out like wildfire. "Is that the accountant? I thought she died. Why is she with the king?" "Nora?" Jared choked out. "How?" "You missed," Nora said coldly. Declan stepped forward, his presence filling the room with terrifying, suffocating pressure. He wrapped an arm around Nora's waist, pulling her flush against him. "Alpha Cole," Declan said, his voice a low rumble that promised violence. "I believe you know my date, and I believe you have some explaining to do regarding the theft of PAC funds. Or were you hoping the river washed away the evidence?" Brenda began to tremble. It's not what it looks like. She's lying. She's a traitor." "Funny," Declan said, snapping his fingers. The massive screens behind the stage, which had been displaying ambient winter scenes, suddenly flickered. A video feed appeared. It was the security footage from the cliff edge. It was grainy, but the audio was crystal clear. "Goodbye, Nora," Silas's voice echoed through the ballroom. "Check Brenda's bank accounts." Nora's scream followed. The room gasped. Declan looked at the trembling couple. "I suggest you start running, but I warn you, I love a good hunt." For a heartbeat, the ballroom was suspended in a vacuum of silence. Then, chaos erupted. "Liar!" Jared roared. His face contorted, veins bulging in his neck as his control snapped. The humiliation was absolute. The council members were whispering. The Lunas were covering their mouths, and the evidence was looming over him in high definition. He had lost his pack, his reputation, and his freedom. He had nothing left to lose. With a guttural snarl, Jared's eyes bled into a feral yellow. He didn't shift fully. It took too long, but his claws elongated, tearing through his expensive suit gloves. He didn't lung at Declan. He knew he couldn't beat the Alpha King. He lunged at Nora. "You ruin everything!" he screamed, aiming a lethal swipe at her throat. The crowd shrieked, but Jared never made contact. Before Nora could even flinch, Declan moved. The air cracked with the force of his motion. He didn't just block the attack. He caught Jared's wrist in mid-air. There was a sickening crunch of bone. Jared howled, dropping to his knees as Declan twisted the shattered wrist with effortless, terrifying precision. The king didn't look like a man in a tuxedo anymore. He looked like a god of war. He kicked Jared in the chest, sending him skidding across the polished marble floor. Jared crashed into the base of the champagne fountain, glass raining down on him like shards of ice. "You dare?" Declan's voice was a low rumble that vibrated in the chests of everyone present. "You dare attack my guest, in my home?" Jared tried to scramble up, coughing blood, but security guards, led by Cale, were already on him. They slammed him face first into the ground, securing his hands, with silver-infused cuffs that burned the skin of any wolf who touched them. "It wasn't me!" a shrill voice cried out. Brenda was backing away, her hands raised, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "He made me do it. Jared forced me to cook the books. I wanted to help Nora, I swear." Nora stepped out from Declan's protective hold. She walked slowly toward the woman who had smirked while she was dragged to her death. "Stop, Brenda," Nora said, her voice steady. "Just stop." Brenda froze, looking at Nora with wide, desperate eyes. "Nora, please. We were friends once. Tell them, I'm innocent." Nora looked at the woman who had stolen her life savings, who had branded her a traitor, who had watched her fall into the abyss without blinking. "You aren't a victim, Brenda," Nora said softly, loud enough for the silent room to hear. "You're just a thief who got caught." Nora turned to the guards. "Take them away." It wasn't a question, it was a command. And to the shock of the room, the sterling guards didn't look to Declan for confirmation. They looked to Nora. "Yes, ma'am," Cale said. As Jared and Brenda were dragged out, Jared cursing, Brenda sobbing, the ballroom erupted into applause. It started slow, then built into a thunderous ovation. The Alpha Council members nodded in respect. They weren't applauding the violence. They were applauding the strength. Declan walked up behind Nora, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "You handled that well." "I learned from the best," Nora whispered, leaning back into him. Her adrenaline was fading, leaving her legs shaking. "Come," Declan murmured into her ear. "Let's get out of here." They escaped to the balcony, away from the noise and the prying eyes. The winter air was biting, but Declan's jacket, which he draped over Nora's shoulders, was heavy and warm. Below them, the lights of the estate stretched out for miles. It was a kingdom, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a home. "You know," Declan said, leaning against the stone railing, "the council is going to expect an announcement." "An announcement about what?" Nora asked, pulling the lapels of his jacket tighter. "That you hired a very effective nanny?" Declan chuckled, a deep, rich sound that made Nora's heart flutter. "No, about why the Alpha King just publicly decimated a rival Alpha for a human girl." He turned to her, his expression turning serious. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face, softening the harshness of his features. "I lied to you, Nora." Nora's breath hitched. "About what?" "I told you humans can't be fated mates," Declan said. He reached out, taking her hand. His thumb traced the pulse point on her wrist. "The truth is, it's rare. It hasn't happened in the Silver Moon line for 300 years. But it happens." He stepped closer, invading her space until he was all she could see. "From the moment I saw you in that river, holding my son, bleeding and broken but still fighting, my wolf claimed you. I tried to fight it. I thought it was just instinct. But tonight, when he touched you..." Declan's eyes flashed silver. "I wanted to burn the world down." Nora looked up at him, tears pricking her eyes. "I'm just Nora. I don't have a wolf. I can't run with you." "You don't need a wolf," Declan whispered, cupping her face. "You have mine. You have my heart, Nora. You have my son's love. You are the strongest person I have ever met." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It wasn't a diamond. It was a band of woven white gold, set with a rare, shifting moonstone that looked like captured starlight. "Nora Bennett," Declan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Will you stay? Not as a nanny, not as a guest, but as my Luna? As my queen?" Nora looked at the ring, then at the man who had pulled her from the darkness and given her a light she never thought she deserved. She thought of Leo sleeping safely in his room. She thought of the life they could build, not based on power, but on loyalty. "Yes," she whispered. Declan didn't wait. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her. It was a kiss that sealed a pact, a promise of a future when no one would ever dare to throw her away again. The cliffs of Greystone Ridge were quiet, save for the wind, but Nora wasn't afraid of them anymore. She stood at the edge, looking down at the river far below. A warm hand settled on her lower back. "Are you okay?" Declan asked. "I'm fine," Nora smiled, leaning into him. She looked down at the baby carrier strapped to Declan's chest. Inside, a newborn baby girl with tufts of black hair was sleeping soundly. Beside them, 4-year-old Leo was chasing a butterfly, his laughter ringing out in the clear air. "I was just thinking," Nora said, turning to her mate, "about how far the fall was." Declan kissed her forehead. "You didn't fall, Nora. You flew." Nora watched Leo trip, tumble, and immediately bounce back up with a giggle. She smiled. She was the girl who was thrown away, the liability, the waste of space. Now, she was the Luna of the silver moon, the mother of the future king, and the most protected woman in the world. She took Declan's hand, turned her back on the cliff, and walked toward their car. She never looked back. And that is how Nora Bennett went from a rejected human sacrifice to the queen of the shifter world. Her story reminds us that sometimes your rock bottom is just the foundation for a castle you haven't built yet. Brenda and Jared thought they were ending her story, but they were just writing the prologue to her greatness. Justice was served, not just by the law, but by fate itself. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, romance, and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. What would you have done if you were Nora? Would you have forgiven them, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.